perfectly encapsulating the final days of the DCEU in its title alone. Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom goes out with a whimper. And to paraphrase another YouTuber of some repute, I saw it so you don't have to. What is more, I saw it before the review embargo ends on Thursday, and I'm not beholden to that embargo, so I'm about to spoil the hell out of this. Few movies have had as tumultuous a production as Aquaman 2. Before I get into the verdict and spoilers for the movie itself, let's take a brief look back at how it ended up as it did. Due to a cosmic imbalance, the first Aquaman grossed more than $1 billion at the worldwide box office, so the then Walter Hamada regime were quick to greenlight a sequel. A justified decision at the time, but in retrospect a premature one, because that's where the trouble started. The Hamada regime soon became the Ansarnoff and Hamada regime, and Ansarnoff aimed at bringing forth the DCU with The Flash, a movie that would end with Henry Cavill's Superman wiped out of existence and replaced with Sasha Calle's Supergirl, Ben Affleck's Batman lost in time and replaced with Michael Keaton's Batman, and since he's an old white dude, the direct follow-up would be Batgirl, where Batman Beyond style, Michael Keaton's Batman would be the mentor for the younger and more diverse Leslie Grace as the replacement Batman from that point onwards. Since Aquaman 2 now was set to be released in between the two, it was subjected to extensive reshoots, partially because it tested poorly and partially because they decided to bring Michael Keaton's Batman into it in order to help set up the DCU. According to Midnight's Edge's own Tom Connor's sources though, the movie tested even worse after this change. Right around the same time, the Discovery acquisition happened and the Ansarnoff and Walter Hamada regime, which had turned DC into a solid bomb factory, was deposed and shown the door. The new interim regime of Pam Abdi and Michael De Luca instantly slammed the brakes on Sarnoff's DCU plans by cancelling the in-production Batgirl. Their goal was to continue what had worked, so they retooled The Flash in order to remove Michael Keaton from the ending and bring back Ben Affleck, who was their choice for Batman for many more movies to come, starting with Aquaman 2, which meant it had to be subjected to reshoots again in order to remove the reshot Michael Keaton footage and replace it with even newer Ben Affleck footage, which would fit with where they were planning to take DC on film. But as I said, the Michael De Luca and Pam Abdi regime was only the interim regime. David Zaslav then hired James Gunn and Peter Safran as the new permanent DC regime, and they decided to reboot, start over, and scrap everything. Well, almost everything. James Gunn's Peacemaker stays, but nothing else, and so they retooled The Flash again and replaced Ben Affleck as the surviving Batman at the end of The Flash with George Clooney, and they did it for shits and giggles. No, really, that's the reason, I'm not joking. All the DC movies are now a dead end, so at that point, Aquaman was retooled yet again, this time to remove any promises of future movies. Most of the earlier reshoots that had cost millions upon millions were simply ripped out. But what of Amber Heard, you wonder? Well, she is a PR nightmare all on her own, and at one point they did come very close to recasting and reshooting her part. But as Tom's sources maintained, the big problem for Aquaman 2 was that the movie fundamentally sucked, and it would have with or without her. The core story was always a flawed one, and the conflicting notes of the revolving door of regimes had all contributed towards making the movie worse and worse. By that point, there was no point in throwing any more good money after bad. Dropping any and all pretense, Aquaman 2 doesn't even get a red carpet premiere, because everyone involved knows there's no point. There's nothing to celebrate here. The only question at this point is, will it open over or under the Marvels? That brief history of the movie done with, how is the movie itself? Let me ask my future self, who will give his out-of-theater verdict. So, how was it? Thank you for that introduction, past self. As for me, I have just seen the movie, and while I'm not in the most ideal of recording conditions, we'll try to make it work. As for the movie itself, I would rate Aquaman 2 as mostly harmless, dumb fun. It's a movie that belongs in the same breath as Morbius, Shazam, Fury of the Gods, and maybe Blue Beetle. It's not up there with the likes of Black Adam or the first Venom, but it was also far more entertaining than both The Flash and The Marvels, to name a couple of recent examples. With that established, the first question on everybody's lips is probably how big a role does Amber Heard have? And the answer is a surprisingly big one. She has a major presence in both the first and the third act, while she's mostly absent in the second. Next, you probably want to know how woke it is, and in the traditional sense, it is not very woke at all. There is no anti-white messaging, there is no misandry, and more than that, there's a very strong pro-family theme in it. In fact, this is the very best part of the movie. The heart of the story is about the bond between siblings and the bond between parent and child. And for those who worried about that, relax, the baby lives. But while the movie isn't woke in the traditional sense that we have come to expect, it still goes hard in on the ESG agenda, more specifically on the E for environment, and here it goes heavy-handed and ham-fisted. The movie kicks off with a brief intro sequence of what Aquaman has been doing the past 4 years. You know, stuff like getting married, gotten a kid, gotten fed up with ruling a kingdom, that sort of thing. This is honestly the best part of the movie, and it's all downhill from here. You see, Manta, the villain from the first movie, is obsessed with revenge, and he's looking for Atlantis to that end. In his quest, he stumbles upon what is, not literally, but functionally, an ancient Atlantean demon. This, for lack of a better shorthand, demon promises him power and revenge, but in return, he wants to be freed from his icy prison cell in the polar ice cap. With the Faustian deal signed, Manta gets to work. And this is where the heavy-handedness comes into the picture, because that work consists of, get this, I'm not joking, burning fossil Atlantean fuel to increase global warming so the polar ice caps melt, in the process wreaking havoc on the planet. Again, I'm not joking, the villain of this movie is fossil fuel and global warming. In order to stop this threat, Aquaman has to go on a body cop adventure with his brother Orm, where much reconciliation is found along the way. They are successful, and in the end, the Atlanteans reveal themselves to the surface world, joining the world government to stop global warming. If it sounds ham-fisted, it's because it is. And so ends the DC Extended Universe with the WEF seal of approval. And with that, back to you, past self. Thanks for that, future self, and there you have it. That's the lowdown on Aquaman the Fallen Kingdom. Normally, I would ask you if you were going to see it, but in this case, I think it's probably more appropriate to ask. Do you think this will be a bigger flop than the Marvels, or only almost as big? Let me know in the comments.